Hi, let me show you a super low-tech hot water system for this whole house, which is a dwelling of only two people, admittedly, only about 100 square meters, not one of those expansive Mac mansions with multiple roofs and a double car garage and a Ram truck parked in front of it. Just a modest dwelling, a normal dwelling like there used to be up until the 1970s for a whole family. And here we have a wood stove, and this wood stove used to be covered with a protective grid, which was there essentially to prevent people from burning themselves, or a cat at the beginning of winter that had forgotten that it was a source of heat to jump on it and burn its paws. And here it is, this grid or this cover that used to be on the stove that we cut out and which is now adding to the junkyardy character of this block of land. Anyhow, one day we had a kettle on top of it, so it was about more than an inch away from the top plate, and we had the kettle there to humidify the atmosphere, and it started doing this. And we realized that if we removed this top plate, we probably could cook on the thing, as it used to be in the olden days, or not so far ago. My grandparents had a wood stove and they cooked on it. So we cut out this protective plate, and we started to boil water on it. And so there was a source of water to especially do the dishes during the day. And then we developed another adaptation, which is that we got ourselves an urn, which is like a big thermos, in which we now store the hot water. It's 10 liters. So really, for the purpose of doing the dishes, it's enough for a whole day, and even more. So it's not it's not super insulating, so it will keep the water very hot only for, say, 5 hours. After that it starts decreasing in temperature, but it's fine. And then other little adaptation, I just mounted this hose on the nozzle, and that makes it a lot easier when you do the dishes to have your hot water flow directly and burn your hands. But anyway, of course you can't have it's not a mixing tap, but it works. You just have to be a bit mindful of the heat. And then we had another idea for the bathroom. We thought, well, since we have this source of hot water here that's good for several hours, what if we fill another urn that's in the bathroom, especially in the evening, and like that we'll have hot water in the morning, and I'll show you where it is. And there, a shelf, another urn. Oh, this one is 8 liters, which is really enough. When it's fully hot, you can have 2 showers with that, using, of course, using a jug. Like in the olden days, like when as a kid I lived in London, and the family with whom I lived didn't have anything other than a couple of taps on their bathtub, and basically you used a jug to mix the water and you pour it over yourself to have a shower. A bit crude, but worked. And of course, since we have been using these kettles and the stove to produce our hot water, we have turned off this 3.6, almost 4 kilowatt water storage heater, which has caused our power bill to go down by about 2/3 to less than $100 per quarter. And together, these 2 urns that we bought, here is the other one I've already showed you. And together with this piece of hose, which, had a price, I think it was about $10 because I had to buy a whole meter, amounted together to $140. This urn was $70, the other one was $60. Delivered. And here's a little system I've concocted to make this hose easily retrievable and for it to stay up and not leak everywhere. So all in all, it's a pretty worthwhile little initiative we have taken, which is saving us about $200 a quarter, because the bills used to be about 300, between two high 200s to low $300 per quarter, and now we are somewhere between $70 and $80. So about $800 worth of savings per annum. And of course, the dollars we save directly correlate to saved kilowatts, which themselves correlate with savings in carbon emissions, either the ones generated by a local coal-fired power station or by a power station in China that burns coal to power the industry that manufactures the solar panels and wind turbines that feed electricity into our local grid, and which we are so proud of. Keeping in mind that the manufacturing processes, not just the electricity generation involved in the making of solar panels and wind turbines, themselves involve the combustion of lots of coal, particularly for the metallurgy. Naturally, these two urns are also produced in China by that coal-burning industry, which has minimal regulations regarding environmental protection and workers' rights. And in fact, when it comes to low-tech items like these urns, the Chinese industry uses a large proportion of forced labor. The fact that our little initiative only costs $170 is the direct result of the environmental and labor abuses that occur in that industry. Now, I presented our system as low-tech. Well, it's kind of low-tech, but manufacturing an urn like this still requires a massive industry involving massive mining for the metallurgy, drilling for oil, refining it to make the plastic parts, a massive chemical industry for the surface treatment of the metal, for the paint of the shelf, and to make the plywood. So a bit of deforestation here as well. More refining of oil to produce the bunker oil that is burned by the ships that carry this sort of merchandise from China all the way here, or wherever it goes. And in addition, all the power-guzzling high-tech involved in making the whole process more efficient, including the massive data centers involved in the wholesale and retail distribution of this thing, which was sent to us by Amazon or some similar heavily computerized e-commerce juggernaut. I just thought I'd say this so you don't think that this urn was built by the local blacksmith. If this urn were manufactured and shipped with regards for Earth's ecosystems or human rights, I don't know how much it would cost, but it wouldn't be $60. As an order of magnitude, I would estimate that it'd be anywhere between half and a full order of magnitude more, 5 or 10 times more, which is fine since you wouldn't be buying one more than a couple of times in a lifetime. And the buck would stay here as well as the jobs. And it would also last probably 5 times longer because the manufacturer would have to care for his reputation more so than a Chinese manufacturer. Another point to keep in mind is that our little initiative generates a fair amount of extra handling for us, like filling the kettles, emptying them in the urns, refilling them, being there to take them off the stove when they start whistling, and so on and so forth. That's time we can't spend on something else, like earning an extra buck, for example. If we turn the electric water heater back on, the equivalent of all this would happen automatically. Note that in all this, I don't count the work involved in keeping the fire going because it would be happening anyway, since it's practically the only source of heating for the house. Just in passing, in case you think that a wood fire pollutes, well, you're right, but it certainly pollutes less than the mining, transport and combustion of coal into a coal-fired power station, the land clearing, the construction and the grid balancing act, associated with feeding wind and solar electricity into the grid, which requires the construction of more infrastructure, and then the shipping of the power over power lines to the house. Our wood fire is undoubtedly the least inefficient way of heating a house of modest dimensions, especially if it's well insulated, which is not the case here because it's an old house and okay, the roof is more or less insulated, but insulating the walls is beyond what we could afford. All this to say that, number one, what looks green on the outside is often black on the inside. And number two, you have to think systemically to have an idea of how much your savings actually cost, especially environmentally and socially. And I suppose socially does cover social stability, in other words, living in peace. And if peace comes into it, I mean peace as opposed to war, then you must also keep in mind that every dollar you spend on an article made in China, well, a proportion of that dollar will go to the financing of this sort of thing, which is kind of targeting us. I don't mean to disparage China, not even the Chinese political leadership, which are two different things, because I am sure that there are good reasons why China would want to build up its military. But there are also reasons that are not so good, like wanting to have the military power to force 23 million Taiwanese to revert back to the autocracy from which they managed to extricate themselves 30 years ago. So the manufacturing of vacuum-insulated flasks is also a matter of national and environmental security in more ways than one. Now, if you wanted to buy a tin urn like this with one of those green triangles with the outline of a kangaroo in yellow on it, if you see what I mean, you couldn't, because the last manufacturer closed about 60 years ago. By the way, to dissipate any doubts regarding the cost of our little system, this urn was $70, the hose $10, the other urn 60, so it's 140. And the reason I said 140 and I also said 170 is because this shelf, the brackets, a bit of paint and the fasteners was 30. So 170 in total. Sorry for the confusion, if any. Thank you for watching. And by the way, when you hear about green measures, think systemically. Make sure that they are green on the outside and on the inside. Okay, there could be a few specks of black, but as little as possible. It must be green throughout. Ciao.